may want this one. Hello?
Hmm.
However,
Yeah, I think I like that. And Kent might like, yeah.
so here's the clicker. You
Hmm.
can try that out if you like. I think it should be good
Okay.
to go.
So we can do.
This one? Yeah,
We
that
could
one's
do. Will the camera, like the streaming camera, it looks like it would. If I was in front, I wonder would it pick me up? It looks like it would.
Hello? Test,
So
test.
an operator comes and does it. Yeah.
Hello? Test,
Um,
test. Huh.
yeah, like a lot of times
See, I
if
don't
the
know what
camera
to do
picks
with
me
this.
up.
Henry's supposed to come to do all this mic stuff, but hello? Test, test. Oh, maybe it's this one. Test. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Look at me figuring that out all by myself.
What we could do is I could do that, and then when Kent goes, she could get the handheld, and then however we do it. But you know, if the camera picks me up, we have a nice sunny night, rainy night, intimate road. I could kind of stand here, and then Kent could maybe sit there, and you come over there.
So you can work on
Okay.
that.
I mean, I think, you know. Mm-hmm. Right. I think you can just relate it to somebody. Did you get that?
I brought y'all some waters.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Oh, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, all right. Good to see you. Stay between the flags. We were just wanting to know. Like, so they were saying I could go down there, but I'm wondering if you're saying I can if I stay between the flags. Okay, good. So we can, yeah, nice. So you're just working from a major. Oh, okay. Don't put necessarily right there between the flags. I'm a pacer. Yeah, yeah. Deal. Okay. I'll probably like just sit down there and do this meeting. I'm guessing it's a Sunday night and she'll sit right there and I'll hand her the handheld and I will have this. What when she gets this, how will she need to cut it on?
Good evening. I'm Kathy Fraley, the Director of Counseling here at Baylor, and I want to welcome you to a very special night. We really appreciate you coming out on this rainy night, and we welcome all the parents who are live streaming with us. We are very privileged tonight to have David Magee and his wife Kent, who are former Baylor parents. We're happy to welcome them back to campus for a very important conversation that I know you will feel uplifted for having had once you leave. Before I welcome David, I want to remind you that tomorrow David will also be speaking with your children during their chapel times, and he is kicking off our Mental Health Awareness Week that the Baylor Counseling Center hosts each year. And it's just a time that all throughout the week we'll have conversations and activities to remind your children to think about their mental health, to make it a priority. So we are excited about that, and we're excited that we have David here to help us kick that off. And our theme this year is Finding Your Joy. So I'm going to share just a little bit of information about David, and then he will come and share his message with us. David Magee is the best-selling author of books including the award-winning Dear William, a father's memoir of addiction, recovery, love, and loss, a Publisher Weekly bestseller featured on CBS Mornings, an award-winning columnist and TED Talk presenter. His forthcoming book is Things Have Changed, What Every Parent and Educator Should Know About the Student Mental Health Substance Misuse Crisis. David is a sought-after speaker in schools and universities, addressing students and parents about mental health and substance misuse challenges and solutions. He is also a creator and director of operations of the William Magee Institute for Student Wellbeing at the University of Mississippi, named after his late son. Few individuals, if any, have spoken in person since COVID to as many students about mental health and substance misuse as David. He's engaged with more than 15,000 students and 5,000 parents and teachers throughout the country, and has helped many students get into counseling or treatment, with some already experiencing life-changing results thanks to his educational and stigma-breaking message. David and his wife Kent, a yoga for addiction teacher, currently live in Oxford, Mississippi. I know you will join me in giving David a big, warm Baylor welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. And, you know, as Kathy noted, I mean, we are a Baylor family. Our daughter, Mary Hallie, graduated from here in 2012, right? And time flies, you know. And it's so hard for me to really imagine. I look back 12 years ago this week. So we're back in Chattanooga, and life can be so beautiful how it can come full circle. 12 years ago this week, I was completely broken, and our family was completely broken. My wife, 3 children, and I was moving away. She'd filed for divorce for good reason. Friends I know in here will remember, I mean, it was a really dark, terrible time for us. Our daughter was here in school as a junior, carrying the weight of the world. 2 things I have to say about that before we move forward. Number one, Baylor is a school of excellence, and it works hard at being champions in everything. And I'm so proud to say that the counselors here at this school were there by her side, and I'll tell when we get through this a little bit, played a key role. Were right on the spot, and it made a difference. You know, but to come full circle and to walk back in here when I don't think anybody gave us a chance of our family getting back together, and we got our marriage back, and we lost our sweet William the next year, our oldest child. But here we are, 12 years later, and we endured, right? And it's support, and it's education, so many things that we learned that we didn't know. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm so appreciative you came out on a Sunday night, a rainy Sunday night. I'm so appreciative of those watching the live stream, because the great thing about a school like this, it's actually one of my favorite things. Schools are community. But one of the beautiful things you get in a really strong world-class boarding school is your community is so wide. And I think that's one of the greatest assets, that you can be here and be present with the school, with your students, with the children, without actually having to be here every day. There's so many ways to do that, to engage with them, to help them on their path of finding their joy. And that's really what my family did. I decided we'd had enough. It doesn't have to be this way. So we're going to go seek and try to find our joy. And lo and behold, we did. And I tell everybody, don't feel sorry for the Magees. We're as happy as we possibly could be. And that's the message we are here to share. If you had seen me driving away, broken, most of my friends wouldn't have taken the time to talk to me 12 years ago, for good reason. And I was probably the last person you would think doing what I'm about to tell you. But 12 years later, over the holidays, when that U.S. budget was signed, we, at the new William Magee Institute for Student Wellbeing, named after our late son at the University of Mississippi, we got a very large federal grant to start a novel schools education program for mental health and substance misuse. And it's kind of shocking. In 12 years, what can happen? But here's the thing. I tell parents, I'm going to tell you tonight, things have changed. Whatever you think you know, and you're not unlike me, you probably do think you know, but you don't. Things have changed, and our students, our young people today, all across America, every single school, every single neighborhood, every single economic line, every single church. Maybe it didn't used to be that way, but that's the way it is now. It's so pervasive. So we're going to talk about that to get you up to speed. I'll give you fair warning. When I go through how things have changed, you might kind of bristle and go, well, that's overwhelming. It can be a little overwhelming, except we know what to do. We really do. We really do. So let's talk about this for a minute. So I cannot help but start on this device, like this thing right here. I mean, it's crazy, right? This generation of students is the first generation to come along where this device is as tethered to them really from birth, because they see all of us doing it, is the air they breathe. We have studies. In fact, if you search around, you don't have to go too many Google pages deep. There are lots of studies that point to many mental health issues related. It doesn't mean this device or associated apps are all negative. It doesn't mean that. You can do homework on it. You can send messages. You can see how many miles it is to get somewhere, get a map to get there. But we know there are direct related mental health issues. Our daughter, who battled an eating disorder, can tell you exact connections to social media, exact, that begin in high school. Every niece I have, most every college student, and not just females, they can point to me specific negative relationships to social media. So we just have to be aware. It's part of the conversation. It's new. It's happened fast. 2007? So it's happened really fast, right? Then things like the pandemic, of course, we all know. Things like that we just kind of endure, and it's not much fun. But imagine a young person in the last decade that comes up in the political angriness in this country. I'm not talking any side, this, that. My only side are the students. That's my only side. Imagine how they feel watching us at times hate each other. Because that's how it feels at times. Again, I'm just talking about the students. It's hard for them to find their place in that world because feelings, there's a lot of turmoil. Then things like the pandemic, a lot of uncertainty. They don't understand, how am I going to make, this is what they tell me, how am I going to make the same amount of money my parents make? I'm a little overwhelmed by that. I hear that a lot. How can I go study every night at school when I log onto social media and I see all my friends going out? It's hard. And even if I make myself do it, I feel alone. There's a lot going on with how they feel. So then the pandemic hits. The CDC and the U.S. Surgeon General have said in the most strong reports, if you haven't read those, the CDC one in particular, you should, is stunning, talking about the state of mental health in America of teens. It's shocking, actually, about the loneliness so many feel, the uncertainty, and again, across all economic spectrums, across every neighborhood, it's a community issue. It's a community issue. So when those pop up, right, when these feelings and issues pop up, we humans don't like discomfort. We don't. We don't like pain. And we are really prone to reach for the easiest thing that alleviates our pain. I did it. As an adult, I'd learned to go reach for a drink at 5 o'clock every day, right? And it might have worked for a minute until it didn't. But that's what that was. It took me a long time to really understand that. But that's what it was. Young people are no different. They're our children. They're in this world. They are no different. It's about how they feel, and it's about changing how they feel more than anything else. A top-line thing, more than peer pressure, more than anything else. But here's a big one. So, if you don't know this, there's two facts I'll leave you with that I hope you'll go home and think about. Young people today go to bed, on average, 2 hours later than we did. 2 hours later. And actually have a lot more demands than I had. Demands in excellence. School still starts the same time. You know, they got a lot. Year-round soccer practice, year-round baseball, year-round piano. I mean, they got a lot. 2 hours, like, do you know what? So their generation, I will speak to middle school students, and I'll bring this up, that 87% of high school students in America get far less, not a little bit, far less sleep than the recommended 8 to 10 hours a day. Far less. Do you know what the number one, I always say that, and I want to be very truthful. It's not number one. It's in the top few. Do you know what in the top few symptoms of sleep deprivation is? It often closely mimics ADHD symptoms. A lot of times, our young people need more rest on a consistent basis. But it's hard, right? They've got a lot to do. And there's this, and there's this. It's hard. Things have changed, but the world hadn't necessarily adapted to engage with them, right? So the sleep deprivation is a major thing. I, myself, am in recovery from alcohol and Adderall misuse. And I can tell you, even after years of practicing to get this down right, if I'm really sleepy, I can go days and never have a thought like, oh, I could go just relax and get a drink or something. If I get really sleepy, it has a better chance of just trying to creep in my mind somewhere. So I understand what they're up against. Lonely. I put this in here not to make us feel bad for every child in college. I put this in here to help you have understanding and empathy for when your child goes to college, or if you already have one there. It's about empathy and understanding. This is a research fact. A majority, I didn't say some, a majority of college students feel very lonely at some point during their college career. I work at a university, the University of Mississippi. I know a lot of college students. I speak with a lot of students at other schools. This is so real. And parents, it's parents that are so puzzled by this because they don't want their child to feel lonely at college. You have so much. You have so many friends. You have this great social club. You're on the athletics team. You have good grades. You're this, you're that. We're coming to see you next week. There's this party. You'll be home for Christmas. But see, that's the reality about emotions. We can have everything and yet feel all alone. And so many times, that's what at the root of changing our feelings that steals our joy, that makes us lose our joy and reach for other things to fill that void. And that's really what it's about, more than anything else. Okay, I said I had 2 facts you need to stick with you. One's a sleep thing. Remember that one. The other one's this. Now, I want to be clear. I do not have any position or stance on legal marijuana or not legal marijuana. That's not my game. That's for other people to figure out. People ask me, how do you feel? Here's my game. Here's how I feel. I want whatever the research shows is best for our young people and families in this country. That's what I want. When we figure that out, that will determine what it should be. That's all I'm for. And the research will lead us there. But here's where we are at the moment. And I want to be clear, this goes the same for states where marijuana is legal. Because so far in America, look up the data, in most states where marijuana is legal, more sales are still done in street marijuana. So far, we'll see where it goes. Again, that's not my game. This is my game. People ask me, okay, David, you have gotten to engage with 15,000 students across America in the last months. Is there anything that surprises you? Number one, I'm completely surprised on a regular basis how many students, males in particular, more males than females, how many students go, wow, Mr. Magee, I thought marijuana wasn't addictive. I thought it helped you lose your anxiety. I'm completely addicted. I am completely anxious. I'm using it every day and I can't quit. Here's why. Street marijuana in America. At the University of Mississippi, where I work, we have the National Center for Natural Products Research. It has been for about 30, 40 years, maybe 40 years. When I was growing up in Oxford, we called it the marijuana fields because it's one of the federal government's only legal marijuana studies where they grow marijuana and they test it. For a lot of years, because it was one of the only ones in America, law enforcement agencies would send in marijuana from street busts they would do. So for decades, our center at Ole Miss has been testing street marijuana from California to Tennessee to Mississippi to Illinois to New York, all over the country. And here's what they tell me, a fact. That low level out there at the beginning of that chart on the bottom left where you see the 4, that's 1995. In 1995, the potency of street marijuana in America, THC, the ingredient that makes you high, was 4%. 4. I tell parents all the time, this is not, and students, this isn't your grandmother's marijuana. It's not. Go out to 2021. The average potency of street marijuana in America had soared nearly 400% to 16%. That is a 400% increase, which does not take into account the sophistication of use messages. Most students now today, waxes, vaping, this and that, not the traditional ways we grew up knowing. And so they're actually not just using 400% stronger marijuana, they're using it at 70 to 90% of its potency. There's also this. Studies are clear. There's no denying the fact that for some individuals, regular marijuana use, depending on strain, can lower their anxiety. Doesn't mean they won't have other issues, but it can. But for at least 50% of the individuals, depending on their personality and depending on the strain of marijuana, this half of the individuals using it, not only does it not reduce their anxiety, it, for many of them, greatly exacerbates it. And I see this all the time. Nobody has even told them this story. I tell students that, and they're so fascinated because they're smart and they're learners. And they're like, really? I need to go look that up. Well, I know just where to send them. And I will have them just come back like, it's amazing when we present students with the information. They're smart. They're really smart. I will watch them go, yeah, well, that's not for me. So here's one more big thing that's changed. There's a lot of talk, of course, in this country about the whole opioid thing we've been through. I'm not going to waste my time telling you about that because you've watched Dope Sick or read the book, this, that. I mean, we developed, through pharmaceuticals, researched an opioid problem in America. Except it gets lost in the story because when people aren't just dropping dead all the time, you don't have the same fear and reaction. It gets lost in the story that at the same era in America, we have had a proliferation of pills, not just opioids. And I want to be clear. Let me set the record straight on one thing. Before I move into that. I'm not talking, when I say the word Adderall, for example, I'm not talking about any adult or student using a drug prescribed by a doctor. I'm all for that. That's not what I'm talking about. Anything under a doctor's care, that's between all drugs were created for good reason. We're talking about misuse. So I want to be clear. Don't squirm or feel any stigma. We are talking about misuse. So we get this proliferation in this country of stimulants, benzos, Xanax, Adderall, and you can go look up. If you don't believe me, look up the prescription growth of that and the proliferation of those drugs. One of the most abused drugs on any college campus after Adderall and marijuana, what's the next one? Adderall. Most abused drugs on a college campus, period. Well, here's where things get complicated, okay? Especially over the pandemic. This has happened so fast. This is the most dramatic things have changed moment out there. This should scare us all, and it scares me every day. Because I'm watching it, and it's not pretty. The demand for drugs called Percocet, Adderall, Xanax, among not just young people, adults also, it has soared as a standard misuse drug, the same way of alcohol or marijuana could be abused, so that it's just part of the lexicon of young people. You know, they just grow up thinking that's in the same realm. The demand so outstripped the reality. If you've been watching the news or you have people taking, again, responsible prescriptions, you know there's been shortages of Adderall, there's been shortages of this. The demand is so high, and they're harder to get now because people have paid attention. Well, drug lords are smart, and they figured out we can just make pills that look like those. So they got, particularly in the era of the pandemic, in the last few years, they went mass market into the counterfeit pill business. And here's the reason why. Because the counterfeit pills themselves are not that good. They're using rat poison. You're reading now about tranq. They're using horse tranquilizers. I mean, this is real, and it's everywhere. I don't mean in some pockets. So these drugs are not that good, and they're kind of off color, but fentanyl. Again, I said I'd spare you the story of fentanyl and all that, because you know. But here's all this cheap fentanyl they have, fueling America's opioid addiction, but they make it cheap, it's readily available, and it's just this powder. So they got these mediocre counterfeit pills, and just over the last few years, they're like, aha, what if we just start sprinkling a little bit of that into all these counterfeit pills? We got them, and they do. And they do. I get a call from a young man, a college graduate, married, got a child. I got an Adderall problem. He played football at Central Arkansas. He's a cool guy. He should know. His wife's a nurse. He read my book. He saw I had an Adderall problem. So he called me. Help. I said, well, here's the first help I'm going to tell you. I'm pretty sure you don't have an Adderall problem. Where are you getting these? On the street. How many are you taking a day? Well, with the doctor, I started speeding up, and I was moving through my prescription pretty fast, so I started buying them on the street. And at first, I was taking 4 or 5, but now I'm up to like 15 or 18 a day, and I'm losing my mind. I said, that's what I thought. You're taking a counterfeit pill that's sprinkled with fentanyl, and you have a fentanyl addiction. He had no idea. He's like, how do you know that? I said, because I see this on a daily basis. Because the week before, I'd buried my young man friend, Thomas Mayo, and some of you may know the Mayo family. Cal, his wife, Caroline, were in school with us at Ole Miss. I'd gotten Thomas, the young man who was a junior at Ole Miss, into treatment his sophomore year. He was doing well. But in his mind, he did, recovery is not just this straight line up. It's often, it fits and starts, and that's just the nature of the beast, and that's okay. But that's okay comes with risk. And so often people will get out, and they get out of treatment, and they're going to try to wrestle with themselves. I quit that thing, so maybe I can just do this. So in Thomas's mind, he thought he could just use alcohol and use marijuana and control it. And I would say, Thomas, see, here's the thing. When you're using marijuana, let's don't even debate that. Let's look at this fact. You have a relationship with a drug dealer because you're buying it illegally. That person is a drug dealer. If for no other reason, that's why that's problematic. Because that drug dealer does not have your best interest. No, it's a business for them. How long before that drug dealer starts selling you those pills that are fake, those pills that they know you want? And as it turns out, when Thomas was found dead last spring, his parents got his phone and see on multiple social media apps and on multiple text messages, here's the drug dealer pushing those pills. He bought a Percocet. But it wasn't a Percocet. It was a counterfeit, and it had fentanyl in it. And people will tell me after that, they're shocked, they're astounded, go march across America, tell every student, scare them to death. This stuff will kill you. I say, really? I wish it was that simple. We've told students what they shouldn't do for a very long time. Also, they're not seeking fentanyl. In their mind, they're seeking other things. I've almost not yet met the young person that says, I want to go get fentanyl. That's not what they're after. They have a relationship with a drug dealer. They offer them pills under different names that seem common, harmless, because they grew up in that era. And so we're facing a moment where people are stunned and shocked and saddened. People like us that lose a child to an overdose. And it's hurt so much. And you have lost friends. You have lost family. And I cry for my son, and I cry for them. And I'll cry as long as I'm on this earth because they were good people. Often they are the most tender-hearted souls. And some of that pain that they can't deal with, they're self-medicating. And they get in over their head. They're no different from the rest of us. They're certainly no different from me, you know. But that gets the headlines, and that gets everybody all upset. But why I'm so proud of Baylor, and what we're here talking about tonight is, when you're dead and gone. My William, I cannot get him back. I want him back so bad, but I can't. I cannot get him back, right? But all those who are here with us now, they're alive. What we don't want them to be is the walking dead. We want to see them. We want to hear them. We want to be there for them. We want to continually try to connect with them. Because it's when we connect with them that we can help them get to treatment, help them get to counseling. And it works. I see change and miracles from it every single day. It kind of works incredibly well. Doesn't mean sometimes you won't start up with one and then you have to make a change, but it works. We want to connect with what I call the walking dead. They're still making their grades. They're on the team sometime. But their joy is at risk. Every young person I know is no different than us. They want to find and keep the joy they deserve. They all want joy. They may want to go to different universities. They may want to play different sports. They may get nervous at a party. Some may not. They might like different foods. They all want joy. They all do. And that's really our job. It's understanding and helping teach them what's in here and how do you manage those feelings and where is their help if you can't. It's a conversation. It's a support. So I'm going to just walk you through briefly to show you. Tomorrow when I talk to the students, we won't go through this long, but I'll just give you, I go through all that in a shorter format. For you, I wanted you to really understand what they face. When I'm with the students, I put a family face on it, something they can relate to. And I'll just show you this, and then I'm going to introduce my wife, Kent, who has, I think, some really wonderful perspectives. And then we're going to take some questions. So you can be thinking, if you have any, about what we're seeing in schools or what we see works. And so this was our family. I love that picture because it was the last one our family of five ever had together. We didn't know, right? You go to the beach. Hey, let's get our picture. Snap. You have no idea. You'll never do that again. That's my wife and I. I love this photo because we just had, Kent and I had this big American dream. We were just children getting married, and we wanted to have children and a family, and we wanted, just like you, we wanted our children to have it better than we had it, you know? And there they are. There's William. He ran track at Macaulay. Oh, my gosh. He was just a tiger. I mean, he ran the 300 hurdles and 4x1 and 4x2 and decathlon, and he ended up running track at Ole Miss. And he was in the Honors College at Ole Miss. And he was in the Croft Institute of International Studies at Ole Miss. He ran and made it all the way to the SEC Outdoor Track and Field Championships that are run that year in Knoxville in 2010 in the 400 hurdles. One of the hardest events in all of athletics, the collegiate 400 hurdles. I made it to the SEC Outdoor Track and Field Championships. Just unbelievable. But he was shy and anxious, and you know, he grew up in a household with somebody he watched go self-medicate. I mean, I was adopted. I didn't literally know who I was or figuratively. I was grappling to find my way professionally. I knew I had some talent, but what exactly am I supposed to do with that, you know? And I was just in this war with all that, and I wanted to be Father of the Year. I taught a young adult Sunday school class for years. I coached youth sports. I thought I was doing everything right, and I guess I was. My children looked up to me. So why would I expect any different, right? William, he first had his first alcohol drink in the 7th grade. We were living in Oxford then, so that was in Oxford Middle School. By high school, he was regularly using marijuana. Hudson, 2 years younger than his brother, he looked up to his father and he looked up to his brother. So he began, at 5th grade, he had his first drink, and by high school, he's regularly using marijuana. And there's our daughter, Mary Hallie. She's like, I'll be a good girl. I'm not going to be like my father reaching for a drink. I'm not going to be like my brothers doing this. But it was kind of like water in the balloon. There was no real decision of how do we treat this or discussion in our family. I'm not sure we really even knew. So it's like water in a balloon, you know, where it's squeezed and it just goes somewhere else. So she developed an eating disorder. So here we were, a family in crisis. I was always afraid of illegal drugs. Alcohol was my thing. But I went through a midlife thing, I guess, when things were going on in my family and I'm grappling for who I am, and I go see a doctor. And I take full responsibility for this, because what I didn't do is I didn't walk in and say, I'm anxious, I sometimes am depressed, I don't know what to do with these feelings, I feel inferior professionally, even if I've had some success. What I said is, hey, I'm fine. It's just that for the first time ever, I'm on deadline on a book and I can't finish it. If I could finish that book on time, I think I'd be fine. We've all said that. If I could get into the house, if I could just get through the school year, if. So I walk away with an Adderall prescription. That was the beginning of the end for me, because I didn't need it, so it didn't fit me well. It fit me well to abuse. And my life and my personality and who I was changed. And 18 months later, I'm mired in infidelity, and I don't know who I am. And my family is falling apart. Thankfully, literally, by the grace of God, 12 years ago this week, I drive off from Chattanooga, leaving my family behind. It's all over. And on that drive, I find myself, literally through faith. And I got back up on my feet, and I was able to get off substances and begin to work to rebuild my family. But a family, you know, it's not like a drama team or a sports team or any organization. When that damage has been done, it takes a long time to do, and you're not going to fix it overnight. So I'm back up on my feet, but our children and our family is just in disarray. Hudson follows William to Ole Miss, and in the spring of 2012, I'm working in New York, back on my feet, and I get a call. Hudson, not William, Hudson, our middle child, sophomore at Ole Miss, has been found essentially dead by the swimming pool at the Sigma Nu house. He doesn't have a heartbeat. He's not breathing. Substance overdose, accidental. They rush him to the hospital. They beat on his heart, get a faint beat, put him on a ventilator, and for 2 days, we think he's brain dead. I mean, we're counting the days to pull the plug. But also, miracles do happen, and Hudson woke up 2 days later, and he began to talk about what he was facing. He began to tell us about what William was facing. And by that time, I was getting back on my feet long enough that we were just beginning to understand we have to talk more. We have to embrace this differently. It's not just going to go away. We can't brush it under the rug. And so we got Hudson, actually he came back here. He got into intensive outpatient substance treatment in Chattanooga. And for him, in one stay, it took. And I'm proud to tell you that he lives by us now, and he's married to a young lady from here. Logan Mays was her name, played soccer at CCS. And Hudson and Lo, as she goes by now, have a child, another one on the way. They're both have their joy. He's now nearly 11 years sober, I guess, 10 and a half years sober. And he found his joy. And we'll talk about that how a little bit more in a minute. But then that next year, the same 2 months later, William graduates from Ole Miss and realizes he's over his head, and he goes into treatment. And, he did well. He had fits and starts. He got kicked out of one, but then eventually got kicked out of another, I think. But then he began to work. Sometimes it takes 6 or 7 30 days, or 6 or 7 60 days. And I tell parents that have a child going through that often, it doesn't look like what you might think it's going to look like. It takes a lot of patience in being there. But he finally got sober, and it really started to take. But, relapse is often part of that recovery journey. And he got off work on a Friday, went to a concert, fell into old habits, and he relapsed, and I found him dead. And I'm sure at that time a lot of people thought, this family's not going to make it. And I don't say this to brag, because I don't think the story I just told you, you wouldn't think I'm bragging. But I am so proud of our family, because we thought we knew about our children, and we thought we knew how to communicate them. We did not. We have a close relationship with our 2 children today, but I still don't assume anymore that I actually know how to communicate with them. What I've learned is we have to ask them a lot of questions, even as adults, and we have to listen. That's so critical. We can't assume how they feel, and they need to know we're there. They need to know we're there. We can't tell them what they should do, and we can't tell them how they should feel. And that has changed our family. And that's what I'm so proud of. That our son is now 11 years sober. That I've changed my life. Years, same thing. Decade. Our daughter, actually my days are adding up. It's more than that. I lose track of time. It just keeps going. Our daughter, years successful in eating disorder recovery because we got her into treatment. And thankful to Baylor and a counselor here who helped us see the light with that. Because that's what they do, and that's what they're there for. And they played such an important role. So that's our family story, and what it has resulted in now is our family has this cause. And we got the William Magee Center for Alcohol and Other Drug and Wellness Education started on the Ole Miss campus. That's Kent, my wife, and I there years after we thought we'd lost everything, getting that center open to help Ole Miss students. A center, by classic design on a university campus, it's there just for the Ole Miss students. But around the same time, the College Board of Mississippi thought, there's something happening here. We had a grassroots movement of stakeholders that said enough is enough. And they created the William Magee Institute for Student Wellbeing, which was just a shell at the time. And I was invited, do you want to come in and help figure out what this is? And an institute at a research university is about often the external work. It'll connect and learn from what's happening internally, but it's about external work. And so I began to do a lot of this. And when I would get into schools and learn and listen, and then students started engaging better with me, and educators were like, absolutely, enough is enough. We are here holistically and for the child, just like Baylor, why we're here tonight, right? And this magic has happened. So today, as I said, just this past week and a half ago, we got signed into law our first federal funding for our novel approach to working with students to find and meet and teach them about substances where they are. I don't have all the answers. None of us do. I've learned the greatest educators don't, because what the greatest educators like those at this school know is that we don't have all the answers with young people. The number one thing we know is we have to see them, we have to hear them, we have to be there for them, and keep asking them open-ended questions and listen. So our novel approach is this. I can't tell you how we're going to do it, except we're going to listen to students and involve them in the process and go figure it out. And I think we got a chance of getting something done with that approach. Because really, that's the only thing we know that works. All the students want joy. And so when I'm at the school tomorrow, in the schools tomorrow, I will leave them with this student toolbox. Do you know how many studies there are about human happiness and joy? Joy is more deeper and lasting than happiness. Happiness is great, but I really like joy. That's why I love this finding your joy emphasis in education this week here at Baylor. Joy is sustainable. It's deeper. There are so many. We know how to get it. That's the thing. This is not a secret. We know the things that take it. We know the things that take it. People that don't have your best interest, the drug dealer is what I call them. We know that you need more sleep when you're growing and learning. We know that activity, a walk, a run, send invigorating blood to your body. It's a natural high. It's a natural high. That's why there's great outdoor programs at Baylor. I mean, get them out, engage, right? We know this kind of teaching that seems like simple things, we cannot assume that our young people really understand this. That's the kind of teaching that we as parents can do, that we as educators, that we as community can do, is not assume and take for granted. Not assume and take for granted what they know, because they're just so barraged by information. And so now, in a few minutes, we'll take some questions. So be thinking of some. And we're laid back. We'll just engage. But I'm so proud to introduce you. She doesn't do many of these. I wish my daughter could have been here, our Baylor grad. She loves this school so much, Mary Hallie. But she's now a mother of three under three. And she has a 4-month-old who's been in and out of some illness, so she just couldn't be here. But my wife, Kent, who is really the hero of our family story, honestly, she won't accept that, but she really is, because she wasn't willing to give up on our family. And, she just wasn't willing to give up. And it had a lot to do with us in this journey. And she's got some perspectives, I think, from a mother and from some work she's done around mental health and substance misuse that I think could share before we do some questions. So my wife, Kent Magee.
Okay. Thank y'all for being here. David is the speaker of our family, so this is always a little out of my comfort zone, so bear with me, but thank y'all for being here. And every time I've heard that talk and that story a lot of times and lived a lot of it, but still every time I hear it, I need to take a deep breath, afterwards. But I've learned so much through what we've lived and just the work we do now. So that's just what I want to share a little bit of. But one thing I've learned is the power of telling your story, the power also of hearing somebody else's story, because every time you hear somebody else's story, it's different than yours. Some of y'all may have read David's book, and if so, you know what I mean. But just kind of hearing what we went through, which was not just one element, but it kind of seemed like a combination all at once, but you probably connect to some part of that, and it just builds empathy, compassion to somebody else, what they're going through, and it helps folks to just feel like they're not alone. We kind of have this feeling that from our society now that tells us we have to put on this polished exterior that everything is okay. And it just, that's, if we, anything by telling our story, we want people to know that you're not alone. If anybody here, which I'm very sure almost everybody in this room could say that they either have a family member or a close friend or a friend or neighbor that has dealt with addiction, or heaven forbid, even loss of a child or a family member to overdose, which, you all see the headlines. It's a major, major problem for our culture now, and a lot of people are facing it. And, as in the work we do now, so many people reach out to us kind of sometimes as a first call because, number one, I think since we told our story, they feel like they're not going to be judged, and just say, time and time again, I hear these people say, okay, this is with my son or daughter, I haven't told a soul this. I really haven't told any of our family or extended family. None of our closest friends or other kids' parents know this happened and this happened and this happened, and we're dealing with this, and we're terrified. And, you just feel so alone. And, that's part of also telling your story is there is so much stigma that goes around this problem, and that keeps so many people, a lot of bad things from the stigma. So many people, it keeps out of treatment. They don't want to admit that there's a problem, especially with your young person. You don't want them to get that label. We were that way. We didn't want that label stuck on them. Everybody in the community, their friends, to know. It keeps so many people out of treatment. So that's one thing telling your story, that's the way to break the stigma. Because and so much just understanding what addiction or substance use disorder, which is really the terminology used now, is, we have this idea of, well, somebody that's really got a problem, they're scruffy and they're not doing well in school, they're isolating from their friends. Very often that's not necessarily the case, which, we had that conversation in our mind. Our son was in the honors college. He was excelling. He was on an SEC track team. He had a girlfriend. He was in a fraternity. All the things, and we knew, like, you get the smoke signs. I think some substance use is probably going on. And then you tell yourself, I think it's just part of the experience of college. Look at how he's functioning. How bad can it be? But, that is nothing but stigma. They can be really, really struggling, sometimes to an extent that it's too deep to get out of. It's too deep when senior year comes from high school or college. They can't walk away. So, that's part of, too, just why we try to share our story. But as we talk to more and more parents, we hear over and over again, I'm terrified, especially the high school age or younger, middle school, elementary kids, parents that we're friends with. They say, I'm terrified of what I'm sending them off to, what the future is for them. So I like to share a little bit of what we've learned, and I kind of boil it down to a little bit of what substance use and substance use disorder is and what it isn't. That's helped me. And number one, what it isn't. You all hear addiction or substance use disorder is genetic, right? It's hereditary. It's genetically predisposed. People tell me they say, look at my family tree on both sides. It's like lit up with it. I mean, my kids I feel like I'm afraid they don't have a chance with this toxic culture that we're bringing them up in our family history. Research shows that more than an inherited gene for addiction, there are genetic markers that are inherited that make one more prone to be oversensitive to substances, oversensitive also to pain, to trauma, to anxiety, to their emotions. Just a sensitive soul, That is so what our son William was. Therefore, on the same hand, he was very sensitive to substance use. Once it became regular, he couldn't step away from it because it was serving its purpose. And just the example that I was told and kind of illustrated that for me, take an oak tree and it drops acorns all around, and you could pick up that acorn and say, well, what's the future for this acorn? It's going to turn into, look what it dropped off of, it's going to turn into a tree. If it doesn't have the environment that's conducive for that acorn to grow into a tree, it's not. Same with somebody with those genetic markers for, a family with addiction. If they aren't exposed to that, which really plugs into parents of young people realizing that, it's not going to grow. If you don't put the acorn in dirt and put sunshine on it and water it regularly, it's not going to turn into an oak tree. And just that awareness, it's not a doom's curse if you have that throughout your family. And then also what addiction's not, what substance use disorder's not, is a result of bad decisions or the inability to assess risk, especially with our young high school students. We think they're just being so irresponsible. They're repeatedly using substances like ours, we say, like, you went on a school trip and drank on a trip, you snuck alcohol into this, event or whatever, which were things that happened, we weren't the only ones, but so what we tried to do was to punish. We'll punish, that's a bad decision, you're punished. That's a bad choice. We try to reason them out of it. You can't punish or reason that's not a route that's productive. So kind of helps me then to think what it is. It's a coping tool. That's why our young people, especially in high school, so this is what we're talking about, they're just trying to cope. Because, as David said, and y'all have heard, the CDC, studies on the mental health problems of our young people are at pandemic levels. So many young people are struggling with anxiety and stress and ADHD and feelings of inadequacy or overwhelm. And it's really, really common among our young people. And, the easiest way to cope with that is reaching for substances. It's easy for them to find. It numbs those feelings, and it works for the very short term, right? It works. So that was helpful to me in learning that. So they're just looking for ways to cope. And as David or someone when we were introduced mentioned, I teach yoga, and I teach in a alcohol and addiction inpatient treatment center. And it was helpful for me to be able to sit in on some of those sessions with the patients there. Now, these are adults, and they're full-fledged checked in for treatment. But, it all started, many of them, when they were in their teenage years. But they were proposed, the question, what works about your addiction? What led you here? What led you down that road? Because what works about it? And some of the things that they said were, one said, when I use a substance, it feels like a hug from somebody I love. And someone else said, it feels like a warm bath on a cold day. And another said, for the first time in my life, when I started as a teenager using alcohol, I felt normal and a sense of at peace when I had a drink for the first time in my life. And when you look at the reason that your young people maybe are reaching for substances, and you hear and realize why, it's just, as a coping tool, you just think, how can you think you're going to punish away that choice or reason them out of doing that when those are the results, So, for that reason, things that we know now that I wish that I'd known then, I wish that I'd had the foresight or just the big picture enough to ask our sons, who were the ones that were misusing substances as a teenager, where is this coming from? What are you feeling? What feelings do you have that are leading you to want to numb out that feeling, to change the way you feel? Just talk to me. And, we were very much coming from it at a different angle because we didn't understand that. So for that reason, we all know what our young people are facing. It's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. Keep the conversation and keep it open. I think it's so great that this week a focus on the school is going to start conversations, hopefully among themselves, among students and teachers, hopefully among parents and their students. But starting those conversations, keeping them talking with you, and absolutely, if they do start to talk, encouraging, the parent-child relationship in the teen years is complicated. I know, I remember. So maybe they're not going to totally just start opening up to you and talking heart to heart. Try to convince them or talk to them about seeing a counselor, seeing a therapist, seeing the school counselor. That maybe sometimes is like that new person. They're willing to, and they know it's confidential. That's the way that works. They can go in and say things that they're afraid that nobody else is going to understand, that mom and dad aren't going to understand. if there's anything good that's come from the pandemic period and this time afterwards when everything's still settling, I feel like more and more young people are open to that, to the idea of seeing a counselor outside of school, even seeing a therapist. A friend of mine, we live in Oxford, Mississippi now, and a friend that has a daughter that's a senior at Oxford High, she told me last week, she said, you know, her daughter had been seeing a therapist at one point. She told me, I think I'm ready to start seeing my therapist again. And she says, I think it's like the cool thing at school. They all are like seeing someone, as she said. And I said, you know, that's great because they're not embarrassed of that or shameful of that. She said they almost wear it like a badge. And I'm sure it's not far different here, but that's good news, you know, I feel. So just keeping those conversations open is the key, I think. That's all that I have.
Okay, I've got a microphone. Okay. Actually, Kathy will take it maybe. So we've gone on long, and I promise we wouldn't keep y'all here too late tonight, but any questions? This is one of the most fun parts if anybody has any questions to engage a little bit. Usually we get one, and we'll be off and running. Anybody have one? Yes. Yes. Yeah, so, you know, the students today, because of this internet and social media at their hands and the dark web, they really today, young people today, are experts in, we used to all, my generation would make joke about Elvis, right? Uppers, downers, this, that. They're like chemists in a way because they will have a friend, even if they're not, that can tell this does this and this does this. And so Xanax, for example, gained popularity. I'm just going to tell you the honest truth. They will tell you for how it helps them come off if there's a lot of cocaine use, and also how it mixes with marijuana. It's all how it interacts into the puzzle that kind of keeps them functioning. You know, Adderall or other stimulants allow them to drink more alcohol at a big event or party without people noticing. Then there's things that get them down off of that. Stimulants get them back up in the morning so they can be ready. That's why our William, I mean, he could get to class and we just didn't understand that he had that thing going where it's like, pooh, here's some stimulant. For him, that was cocaine, sadly. And then Xanax enters in for him because I got to go to sleep. It's big, but there is no Xanax. If you ask your law enforcement people in any community, it's all counterfeit. Now, and I say all, let's speak facts. I think statistically 80+%. There's very little real Xanax that is circulating on any college campus anywhere, I don't think. Very little real Xanax. It's all counterfeit. We had a couple over here. Didn't somebody else? Oh, hey. Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. And I'll be honest with you. So the question is about boys and young men. I'll be honest. It's a bad joke because it's a painful joke, but it's a true joke. I have a running joke that I say, like, people say, I mean, how do you get college students, like a young man in college, to be willing to go to get help? And I say, it's like a war, honestly. Sometimes it's a knife fight. And I say, and then once you get past the father, then you can go start talking to the student. So in that young men thing, honestly, one of the biggest walls I run into are the fathers. Honestly, I'm one, so I'm just allowed to say that. And I love them, and sometimes they're my friends, and I was that person. I wanted to sheriff my son William into where I thought he should be. I'd be the sheriff. And there was a lot of sheriffing, and so that's one starting point. And that's just a male thing in general. We're supposed to stand tall. I tried to do it till it broke me. And people say, how can you be so vulnerable now? It's like, I didn't have any choice. I was literally broken into pieces. You just come back, I'm just different. And I think that's one of the starting points with young men. I think it'll really be fun. So peer-to-peer. I've been cultivating some young men to be able to start bringing back, and a great school like this that loves this kind of education, you know, we've got some. I think getting young men in front of young men is a real key to kind of help them go, okay, you know, that they can relate to, they can. It often starts at home. This parent thing is so important. I mean, sometimes I'll just be, I mean, I've been working one, and somebody from Nashville goes to a great school, we all know, and I mean, parents have been friends for a long time, and they're just phenomenal people. But I've just been banging heads with them for like, listen to me, your young man is suffering seriously. And I understand you want a sheriff, but we just got to get him. So, I mean, there's just a lot. You know, we're not going to solve this overnight. I think there's some good peer-to-peer opportunities. I think role modeling vulnerability, really, studies show that works. And often that starts at home. And also that's, again, peer-to-peer and continuing the conversation to normalize it. With young people, so there was, you might have seen, there's so many studies on this. You might have seen one that just came out, and you'd think like, why did this get so much press? Doesn't everybody know this? It was just last week, or 2 weeks ago. A study shows that people who are suffering from sadness, when they engage in conversation, they feel better. Right? We know this, but that made headlines in a lot of places. I read it in like 3 different places. I get back to even young men and everything. The conversation. Open-ended questions, dialogue. How do you feel? How does it make you feel when you go to a party and everybody's doing this? How did it make you feel when you didn't get in the game? How do you feel? And then subsequent questions. Last thing I'll say, because I don't mean to go so long in this, but really important example, real quick. A few months ago, I had a mother call me and say, my son is suffering from anxiety. I mean, he uses alcohol and he uses marijuana, but we talk about everything. So I know everything, and it's not substances. He's drowning of anxiety, and I can't figure out anything. And I'm no therapist, so I don't try to be. But I play a quick first role sometimes with young people to just try to figure out what's going on and then kick them into therapy or counseling. I don't do it, but I'll get them out of my hands really quick into it. I spent 50 minutes with this young man at lunch. I was like, I got another meeting. Nowhere. He is sure. He is so convinced. He is so honest to me, and he believes every bit of it. He just suffers from anxiety. I don't know. So finally, I just think, okay, I've tried everything, and it just doesn't seem like it's it. I was like, hey, you were supposed to call me Monday. Why didn't you call me Monday? Oh, yeah, Mr. Magee. Well, we gotten friends now. I'm just going to be honest. I was completely bombed on Sunday night. Like, okay. How often do you get completely bombed? Well, I mean, just on weekends. What do you define as a weekend? I mean, Thursday to Sunday. I mean, sometime Wednesday, if it's a big week. When is most of your, like, when do you feel most of your anxiety? I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, early in the week, I mean, sometime midweek, I'm like, what am I going to do? And then he's kind of looking at me, he's like, oh, Mr. Magee, I got an alcohol problem, don't I? You know? And he went in and we got him into a counselor. So it's just questions and presence and kind of, they don't always know to share. It's just trying to keep the dialogue. I'm here with you. I'm here with you. And he's a friend now, and I've kind of, I mean, he hadn't solved it overnight. You can't also expect him to solve it overnight. You can't. Don't. It's okay. It's a process. It's about developing emotional intelligence. People say, what was the secret to your change? I grew up, meaning I developed more emotional intelligence to understand what I was feeling and what I didn't need to falsely treat. Okay, any other questions? I will not give an answer that long, I promise. Yeah. And they will tell their friend it came from. One of my big talks, and the students will hear from me tomorrow, is the drug dealer is not who you think it is. You're probably, on most college campuses, they're members of the same team, they're in the same social group, they are their peers. I told a legislative friend of mine not too long ago, they're like, hey, you ought to be so excited. We are going to put to death. I'm going to get this in the law. If somebody sells a pill with fentanyl, it kills somebody, we're going to put them to death. I'm like, you are going to put half the kids of parents in your Sunday school class at risk for going to jail, death penalty when you do that. If that's what you believe, do it, but you need to really think about that. And they were like, well, actually, I've never thought about that. I said, I'm not talking about how the drugs are getting in here. You can go tackle that. But we need to understand it's usually on college campuses everywhere, it's very much peer-to-peer. It's their friends. And I'll try to choke back a tear when I say this because I love our dear buried son, William. But he introduced our son, William, to Xanax. Our son William introduced our son Hudson to Xanax, his younger brother. He picked this up at college. He thinks he's doing his brother, who he loves so much, a favor. But if we really have to boil that down to what that is, that's what it is. And who did William get him from? His fraternity pledge brother, who was also his roommate, who was running substances out of Memphis. You know? Our son Hudson sold some marijuana to some students, he said on a stage before. It is what it is. And it breaks my heart to say that, but that's just the truth. The drug dealer is usually a very close part of their life. And I talk to them about it. I talk to students. We've had really good response of that. I mean, they just don't usually think of it that way. Anything else? I thank y'all so very much. This has been so amazing. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
David, Kent, thank you guys again for being here with us. Thank you for the courage and sharing your story and the care that you show for all of us and for our own children and students. We're really excited that our students get the opportunity to hear you all tomorrow. And parents, we invite you to continue to have the conversations with your students throughout this week and throughout the year, and know that we are here as a resource for anything that we can help with. So thank you again for coming.